Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And we do practices all the time, and then sometimes from time to time we do questions, and let's do some questions. So go ahead and ask anything you like, things about the or things you're just curious about. You can unmute yourself or type in. Go ahead and fire away. When we go to the Mystic Vibration class, we'll do a practice, but I thought I'd still give you guys an opportunity to, ask what's on your mind.
And you can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand, you can type into the chat as well, any questions or anything you might have. I think we had some last week we didn't get to, but I didn't write them
Yeah.
down. So,
Okay, well, we'll do some practice. So, one of the things that I'd like to talk about is, when we look at the idea of mystical healing or esoteric healing.
any question came in.
Okay.
Can you explain the relationship of Kuthumi to Astara and his role in the degrees?
Yeah, to me. Yeah, I mean the role of Kuthumi with that, for those of you, Kuthumi is considered like the master of what you would call the second ray. There's different rays. There's 7 rays, with the soul, but also with like a group of people associated with each of the soul rays. Like, not people, that's not the right way to say it. There's a group of souls associated with each soul ray. And Katumi is of the second soul ray, which is love and wisdom, right? And Katumi in other incarnations is Saint Francis of Assisi. He was one of the 3 wise men, and um, Pythagoras. He was Pythagoras. And he was also the person who built Taj Mahal. I mean, there's other things that um, he's associated with. He was a great Buddhist practitioner in one of the incarnations, but Kuthumi is the source of the teachings for Astara. So not only are we affiliated with Astara, but the teachings come through transmission from Kuthumi directly to Erlane Cheney. Like when she was writing the books, a lot of times she would say, like, who am I to be writing these books? But she was acting as like a mouthpiece for the teacher, and the teacher being Kuthumi. And so Kuthumi was giving the information that we call the degree lessons through Erlene Cheney. And this is a very common practice with teachings. A lot of times we think of teachings from the point of view of, humans, and like, what book did you get this from? Where did you read this? You know, what base of knowledge is this, information coming through or coming from? And when you look at mystical practices or esoteric practices, deeper practices in various traditions, it comes more through transmission. This is why we talk about intuition. This is why we talk about clairvoyance. It is an aspect of intuition to be able to access information like this. Intuition isn't just going, I feel I should go left, or I should go right, or I need to do this. It is tied to learning, tied to overcoming obstacles, tied to healing, um, problem solving, but it's also tied to perceiving the soul and perceiving the inner worlds, being able to perceive something that's even beyond the senses, beyond our normal everyday life. And as we start to refine these practices, there's information that comes in. We don't even really have to access it, it just starts streaming into the conscious mind. You could say it's always out there. We just have to tune our antenna to be able to tap into this information. And so a lot of times, even breakthroughs in science, breakthroughs and different disciplines that we would consider science are also a form of transmission. And another way of saying it, like in the Buddhist tradition, would be inner terma, right? Terma meaning teachings. And again, we think of teachings as being like something that we read, or like, look at the tree of life and we see like, oh, there's all these centers that are associated with the tree of life. But truth is dynamic. It's not just a bunch of facts, a bunch of information. It is something where there is form and there is an essence, and we're constantly evolving and accessing deeper levels of awareness and understanding of these pieces of information. You know, they have kind of a profound effect on us. And, if you look at the idea of the teachings for Astara, depending on how you would use it, you go through and you read the books and you kind of go, oh, this is very interesting. But then as you start applying it in your life and you start reflecting on it and you start sitting with it and you start doing the practices, the meditation and the body awareness and developing the intuitive mind, those pieces of information begin to bloom or blossom like a flower. And there's much more information past that. And so when you have a great teacher like Kuthumi, you could say there's seeds that are planted within the consciousness of the student and in the consciousness of humanity. And as we refine ourselves, as we refine our intuitive mind, as we refined our ability to tap into the light acts as the seed that, or the fertilizer that hits the seed and opens it up to blossom. And as it opens it up to blossom, we begin to have transmissions, right? Inner transmissions. And so Erling Cheney received these transmissions. They were given by Kuthumi. And Kuthumi, like I said, is St. Francis of Assisi, was one of the three wise men. And it is said that Kuthumi, or St. Francis of Assisi, is the next Christ. When we are waiting for Christ to come again, Christ is a position, it's not necessarily a particular being. And so the person or the being that's going to fulfill that office of the Christ is said to be, Kuthumi, you know. And so as we go through and we do our practices, we're being guided on walking in the light, which we need light to be able to experience love. And, even the teachings of preparing us for our transition and helping people after they've transitioned and doing healings on people to like ease their suffering. It is a very big picture of how to ease the suffering of a soul or of humanity. It's not just looking in the moment, it's looking like over a lifetime. And then it's even looking at over several lifetimes, how do we ease the suffering of this soul in whatever journey that might be in? Because you could say like how we transition, how we pass really kind of dictates our experience in the inner world, but our next incarnation. And so my personal experience with Kuthumi is he's a good, that saying, you can give a man a fish or you can teach him how to fish and he'll never go hungry. Kuthumi is very good at teaching you how to fish. You know, my personal experience with Kuthumi is I have like these deep experiences with Kuthumi. I can feel teachings coming in that I try to process, and then he pulls back and lets me kind of process it instead of just sitting there and being present. That idea of even our meditation, we expand, we come back in our body, we expand, we come back in our body. The teacher is present and then withdraws. And you could say he's always present, but in that withdrawal, we have to apply the teachings. And so he is of the light. That is of the light. It's the essence and form. There's the presence and then the withdrawal, and the presence and the withdrawal, and the presence and the withdrawal. And we don't just get to sit and kind of bliss out. We really have to align ourselves with the light. And in the withdrawal, it deepens our alignment with the light. And, the more that we experience the light, the more we begin to experience divine love. Right? And the more we start to experience divine love, the more we really begin to align with our true nature and the nature that is divine, beyond the life or beyond earth or beyond what's going on in the moment. Life is so much bigger than our perceptions of the things going on in the news and the things going on in our particular life this week or this month, or and so you would say Kuthumi is a guide, Kuthumi is a teacher, and Kuthumi is a presence, like a guiding light for a soul who's wanting to evolve very rapidly and align themselves with divine order. I guess is a way to say.
Thank you. And then there's a question in chat, but first go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you. I really appreciate this inquiry. I sometimes have the sense that information is coming in, but not in a level of consciousness I can yet access. Is that just my ego getting fanciful?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's a very accurate perception. The more we have quietness or inner stillness, the more that is always there. And it really is, if you think of light, there's information in the light. There's an order to the light. And we're touching something on the other side of the veil. And really you could say you're touching something on the other side of your senses. If you go beyond the senses, it's a lot of it is there. It's just the intellectual mind and the body, they're very strong. It's hard to move past them. And so there's going to be times where there's a sense of something, and then you might process it in a dream, or it might start to come into your everyday mind in little bits and pieces. And I go back reflecting on the idea of Kuthumi and using this as an example. And my perception of Kuthumi over the last 30 years has changed very dramatically. I don't know that he's changed, but my ability to perceive it over a period of time has changed dramatically. And I went through this phase where I would do devotional practices to different beings, and one of them has been Kuthumi for a very long time, way before Astara. And at first it was just this nice, peaceful, blissful thing. And then as time went by, there was times where I could really feel the presence. And then there was times where I could feel nothing. Like, I mean, absolutely nothing. And then I would feel the presence again. I mean, I felt like if I closed my eyes, he was standing in front of me. And I went back and forth with this, and I gotta say it was pretty confusing. And over a period of time, like I kept having like further extremes. Like I could feel the presence even stronger, and then I could feel the lack of presence even stronger. And I was like, ugh, am I doing something wrong, or am I not devotional enough, or you know, was that in my mind, like you were saying? And then, I was doing a deep dive on some of the writings of Kuthumi, and more than just in the degree lessons. There's places where he has like letters and things that he wrote to disciples and things, back when he was in the body last time. And he made that statement. He said, the teacher, has a strong presence with the student and then at some point withdraws so that the student can assimilate the teachings and apply the teachings. He said otherwise the student doesn't make any progress. They're bathing in the presence of the teacher. They're bathing in that light, but without that application, they really don't own it. They don't integrate it. They don't use it for evolution. And I would tie that to what you're feeling now. Like, you can sense something's there, and it's those practices where we feel the body awareness, or we put our awareness on those things that you might be feeling, and you kind of sit and wait for them to come in. And even when you start to apply them, it might not even be an accurate application at first, but still there's the effort of like bringing it forth. And then at some point you sit with it and you're like, oh, I don't know, like I kind of give up. And then all of a sudden in that stillness again, you'll perceive even greater. And you're trying to bring something very abstract from the other side of the veil. And so you are going to sense something, but we're so used to using our intellectual mind where we kind of go, or at least I do. I don't know. I think it's the nature of the mind where, what is that? What does that mean? What am I supposed to do with? And at some point, it's just about having that experience. And if I go back to that thing about like there's these seeds that have been planted, and as you sense these things on the other side, you might be aware of them at some point. At some point, you're able to put your focus or attention on some aspect there and sit with it, and something will open, something will blossom. And you'll start to have inner experiences because you have sensed something, and then you're able to sit with it just like we sit with the body, like you're kind of practicing for something much greater. And at some point, you're able to start sensing things that are beyond the senses, and it will just keep opening up and opening up. And if you think about it, it's like if you were to slow light down, like really slow it down, it's a series of these like openings, right? It's like an opening, an opening, an opening. It's just constant expansion. But we're so stuck in the form that we only get like little flashes. And so that thing that you're sensing is kind of the journey, you know, that inner explorer where you get in that boat and I'm going to ride the wave. It's just getting yourself in that boat, or putting your awareness on that seat at some point, and we really begin to experience more of our true nature at that point than we do in our normal everyday life. Intellect doesn't really have the ability to experience that. It understands the idea of it, but it doesn't really know how to do it or can pull it off. It is purely an intuitive practice.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, keep me posted on that. And good for you.
In that vein, someone's asking, how do we distinguish between intuition and our inner our own inner talk?
Sit with it. Because inner talk, or your mind, or your mind is like going, oh, I think this or I think that. The more that you sit with it, you're shifting out of that repetitive mind, and you're shifting more in the intuitive mind. Think of the intellectual mind as trying to have stability through repetition, and the intuitive mind is trying to have stability through change or movement. And whenever you're not sure of, like, is this my mind? Am I making this up? I wouldn't put a lot of value into something. I would just sit with it. Because that's the idea of wisdom, or that's the idea of the light. Is it's not about it being a thing. It's about it being a pathway. It's about it being a movement. And so even if you identify something like, whoa, I think this is a thing, if you sit with it, something will open up and blossom from that. There will be a movement associated with that. And it's more important to have the movement than to have a list of these things or these aspects that we might like personalize, or we use to organize the environment for the intellectual mind. And so whenever something comes up, doesn't matter if it's true or not, if you sit with it, it aligns itself to a greater degree with truth and with light. And even if it's true, it will become more true. Like it keeps aligning itself to a greater degree, because at some point, first, like when we do our practice with the nervous system, you're harnessing rest and repair, and action and activity, or fight flight, right? And really, this is a manifestation of divine intelligence, but in the body, and it is a manifestation that affects the chakras in the energy body. And the more that we begin to really harness these two aspects, regulate them, harness them, and have them really move back and forth with each other, right? The more that we do that, we begin to experience love, right? And then as we start to experience love, we keep having a greater and greater level of expansion. We're filled with more and more light, and we're experiencing greater levels of love. And then this is the area where the will comes in. And as we begin to experience the light, this is the conversation that you could have about free will. And all the things that we do, there's always these little tiny choices. Do I align with the light, or do I align with the form? Do I align with the light? Do I align with the form? Do I align with the repetition that I keep doing over and over again? Or do I align with the movement? And the idea of free will is, are you going to identify with the form and repetition? Or are you going to identify with movement and light? And if we're identifying more with the body, right, or of the lower nature, we keep identifying with the form. But if we're walking with the light, we keep identifying with the movement or the essence. And so we begin this journey that we would call the path.
And then go ahead, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Thank you so much.
Hey, oh, this is fascinating. Totally fascinating. The I just came across a realization. I think we're talking about the same thing, but I've just kind of grew into that today is as the divine spark, we have the three seeds that come down. It's really like a divine light.
Mhm.
And the best I can do in myself is to reflect that light, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's like that's what I can do is reflect that divinity, not
Mhm.
going out into this, the whole religious thing behind it. But
Right, right,
this
right.
is this is just this is the best I can do. I had such a resonance with that I can, and this kind of dovetails to what you were just saying. Like I can reflect that light and keep reflecting that light, or I can take a choice and go somewhere else. And then, so that's my kind of like my new center, if you will, is to come
Yeah,
to it
yeah,
and say, what reflects more light, if you will,
right,
kind of thing.
right.
So that's just the fascinating thing. I had
Yeah.
such resonance. I have this inner stuff, all the little pores and the hairs go like, "Neep." When I kind of,
And if you think of the idea, the practice that we do of materializing light, with the materialization breath, you're concretizing light to come in, you're going out beyond the senses and you're concretizing light. And part of that practice is you're aligning the will with the light. And really is what it's doing is all those little choices, when you do the materialization breath over and over again, part of that alignment with the light is you're starting to go, instead of doing the same thing over and over again, I'm going to align with the light. I'm going to align with the movement and the truth. And if you think about, like, you're trying to materialize something in your life, if repetition was going to do it, you wouldn't be seeking to materialize something, right? And so you can use something in front of you and go, oh, let's materialize light. Let's have a shift. Let's have movement. And in doing so, you're actually refining the will. And just every time you do that, you're aligning the will a little bit more to the light, a little bit more to the light, a little bit more to the light. And the act of materialization of the light, and really the act of diminishing our suffering, is not through the repetition. It is through doing something different and embracing that light and that internal movement. Well, we got to move over to the mystic vibration class, but
Good questions.
yeah,
thank
was
you
there
so
more
much.
questions or no? Okay, so we're going to move over there and we're going to do a practice.